Get up, get ready, it's time to be woke. Take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I am Andy Kennedy, and it is Monday morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We have a veritable plethora of stories to talk about, a complete cornucopia of different things to discuss this morning. Here in Ontario, we are currently under attack. And when I say that, I don't mean from a political or financial point of view. I mean that the province of Ontario, there are certain pockets where we are being attacked by gypsy moths, and they are going around and indiscriminately destroying trees. One which is right directly behind my house, and it's kind of surreal when you watch and go out and listen. You can actually hear them munching on the leaves, and it's kind of strange. I've been living in the same property since 1996, and these are old 60, 70-foot trees that have been here for longer than I have. And to watch them being systematically destroyed is kind of certainly a sad thing. But I guess because of the life cycles of in certain ecosystems of these animals, and because of the heating up of the environment, we can thank the current climate crisis for the slow destruction of things like trees and other things like that. So I just wanted to rant that out first, just because it was sad, because I am a friend of trees. Good morning, Carrie Barber. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Andy. I'm sorry about your trees. The U.S. has been ravaged by beetles, particularly in the western portions, mountain areas.
Wasn't that the 60s on the Ed Sullivan show?
No, it's a bug, not a band.
Sorry.
So yeah, no, it's happening everywhere. So it also contributes to fires when you have ailing trees that are dying. So my condolences to everyone in your neck of the woods. Yeah, we deal with it a lot. So so good morning, good Monday morning to everybody who's joining us. If this is your first time joining us, we are live. And we do want you to join the conversation, push back, particularly if you are if you're a Bitcoin enthusiast. You may not like some of the lead in this morning, but we want to hear your comments, push back, any resources you want to share, comments, all of that sort of thing. It's all fair game. But I will say this, bring your A game, because we do our homework here. At least, try to do our homework. But so something funny happened over the weekend. Everybody's favorite darling, Elon Musk, got called out. But first, I thought this was interesting, and I want to do a deeper dive into Bitcoin later, because I think it's a very complex, nuanced issue from a macroeconomic standpoint. But El Salvador has just announced that Bitcoin will be legal currency in their country nationwide, which is kind of a big deal. And it also, from a macroeconomic front, I'm like, okay, here it goes, economic collapse. And I know that the Bitcoin investors themselves who stand to benefit are like, yes, this is a good thing. It's public money. No, it is not a good thing. And it's truly not the answer to corruption, because it's just yeah, it's a destabilizing force. Andy, you can certainly go into it, but that was the first big thing. And then Anonymous took a swipe at Tesla and Elon Musk. And so far from what I'm seeing, I haven't pulled the SEC reports for Tesla yet. So hold on this. This is just my casual observation in this moment is Anonymous is kind of right. $2 billion in subsidies from the federal government, the US federal government, went to Tesla during this pandemic and all of the things that they're working on. So they're actually making money off of Bitcoin, not off the products they sell. And oh, by the way, this is the same company that got on their employees and was trying to force them back to work, even though their own employees were making more money on unemployment than on the assembly line where they were risking life and limb during a pandemic. So yeah, good on you, Anon, so far, because it sounds like, yeah, this is yet another instance where we've privatized profit and made public all the investments. So it's a story I'm going to dig into a little bit. But Andy, any initial thoughts on the Bitcoin replacing a fiat currency?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, right? You've got, there's different levels of monetary sovereignty, and when you look globally at the way that the world is set up, right? The U.S. currency is basically the trading standard in the world, right? And El Salvador, small country, their debt is denominated somewhere else. It's denominated in U.S. money. And so they don't have the ability to do their own thing. And, so what we see is that these countries are tired of being bullied by the U.S., right? By the power of the American money. And so they're looking to other ways in what they think is a way to free their ability to spend in the open market and perhaps get some kind of floating their exchange rate and getting some kind of sovereignty in that space. The problem is that because of the lack of understanding of what cryptocurrency actually is and what Bitcoin is currently, is basically, as it stands now, is just a commodity, right? It has to be backed by a real fiat currency. It isn't what they think it is. It can't just become a money system unto itself, because there really is nothing. There's really nothing in place that it absolutely is going to be demanded by people in whatever society that it's in, right? So like I said, there's a lot to unpack about it. But I think that the other side of that coin, and specifically with what Rohan said and what people who are all invested in the crypto game said, is interesting, because when we look to the future and what our money system is going to be like, right? Because as new technologies develop, right, we're going to be looking at a more online system and maybe even the elimination of the paper currency, right? So that everything's online. Well, and let's be clear, we don't know what that's going to look like in the future. We can't, because that system hasn't been figured out yet. It hasn't been created yet. What is Bitcoin going to be a part of that future? It may very well may be. It depends on the system that we create to support it, if we decide that's what we want to do, right? Currently, it's not that system, but it has the potential to be. And the problem with that is that if everything becomes an online trading type of scenario, right, the people like Rohan are more concerned with their own personal information and having the ability to make transactions, privately, without Big Brother watching and knowing who you've talked to your entire life and who you've transacted with, and everything about you, right? Because that's what big tech wants, because they want to be able to data mine every single thing about everything you do and then make money based on that system. Well, how do we create a new online version of currency while allowing people to transact in private without Big Brother watching? And that's the main push of what these people are currently doing, like Rohan, are doing, because they understand and how that is important, right? And because of this, and because this is a new, up and coming technology, and we really don't know what it's going to look like, Rohan's biggest push is, well, we obviously need to have it regulated, like we are supposed to regulate banks, like we are supposed to regulate currencies and spending, right? Because it's currently just a commodity-based, free-flowing, people getting rich thing with no restrictions on it. And that's the biggest problem. How do you move into that space with the way it's currently set up, into a place where people are protected, nobody's going to lose their shirt, or having Big Brother understanding and watch everything you possibly do? That's the biggest problem.
Right. And I think that goes back to, I'm not going to speak for Anon, but I think the point that I got from their swipe and their allegations was, you shouldn't have one individual like Elon, with his personality and everything else, being able to tank that particular market for small investors. And that's exactly what happened with one tweet that he sent out. That was a little bit arcane, but I think people took from it what they wanted, and it dropped the value by like I think it was total of 7%. That's kind of a big deal, and no one person should have that power. So I agree with Rohan. Maybe we put some rigor around this.
Well, absolutely, right? Like, I mean, if El Salvador has decided that now this is their currency, that this is what they're going to be using on a day-to-day basis, if someone like Elon Musk can walk in and have a 40% effect on that by with a single tweet, does that crash the economy of El Salvador, right? What effect is that going to have? And so it's those regulations that have to be in place that say, no, that's not okay. I know oligarchs are now in a place where they think that their entire existence, they can do whatever they want because they basically run everything. And I'm not going to get in trouble for it, because I've seen over the last decades that, all things have been put in place to allow that to happen. But when you're talking about crashing countries now, right, that's where it gets to be a huge deal.
Right. And you have set up two beautiful segues in what you just said. So, Andy, your professionalism.
There you go.
On point this morning.
I did it. I was perfect. Did it perfectly, and I have no idea what I did.
Yeah, you did. You did. So real quick, shout out to Holly and everyone else who's joining us this morning. Please don't be shy. If you see something that you question, you want to weigh in, please do. Holly said she's dealing with cicadas here. Yeah, it's the 17-year cicada thing, and it's the biggest wave. So enjoy. If you have dogs, good source of protein. So let your dogs out. Okay, so Andy, your segue, beautifully done, was regarding oligarchs and how they feel like they could do whatever they want to do. So our main topic today is about democracy, and I just thought it was hilarious because if you've been on social media at all and you're in the US, you have been inundated with fundraising pushes from Chuck Schumer, Stacey Abrams, a bunch of them delivering the exact same script, and they do it so flat. Hey, don't scroll away. This is Chuck Schumer. Democracy's under attack. And it's just like that. I'm like, whoever produced these, first, you got paid to do this shit, and it was terrible. It's all terrible, absolutely terrible. And further, it's insulting for these folks, the people who are actually in legislative power, to use the other legislation as a fundraising push. No, get your ass back to work and fix it. I don't want to hear from you, Chucky. I don't want to hear from you, Stacey. get your ass to work. Don't ask us for money. Right. So, yeah. And Holly says, yeah, it's so annoying every time I just crack up. But what we're really going to talk about is democracy, oligarchs, and those people in power. And what the hell is going on? So this is not necessarily about the election laws in the US. We're going to start with Russia. And this was a story that Andy picked up. So thank you, Andy, for being wise and aware on this one.
Right. And I just want to clarify that please don't get us confused with MSNBC at this point. Neither Carrie or I look anything like Rachel Maddow. This isn't the democratic centrist Russia narrative. No. This is a little different.
Oh, it's a little different. So put up the first graphic, Andy. Let's set this one up. So, yeah, so there was this story that went out, and I think it was a phenomenal look at elections, right? So here is the world's he's the richest oligarch and one of the most powerful in the world. And we're talking about Russian President Vladimir Putin. So what he did over the weekend was he signed in a bill from his own party. For those who don't know Russian politics, his party controls everything, absolutely everything. And we'll get into how that happened in just a second. But you talk about their legislative body, it's all the same party, and then he's at the top. So here's the bill that went through. They have now banned what they call extremists from running for office, and including the party, right? So why would they do this? First off, this bill does not designate who an extremist is. In the past, they've designated, based on religion, like if you were Muslim and certain pieces of it, you could not run for office. And then one of the things that they did, just like here in the US, if you have a felony conviction, you couldn't run for office. So we'll get into kind of how this works, but this particular bill seems to have been targeted at one individual and one brand new organized party that is challenging the corruption and the oligarchy in Russia. So if you're not familiar with Alexy Navalny, and I butchered that last name, my apologies.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did. Can you help me out here, Andy?
No, I want to see you suffer.
Okay, so Alexy, why are they so terrified of this Alexy character? He's just this little small-time lawyer and a blogger. So this is really the crux of the story. And so we want to set this up and explain it in a way that everyone's going to understand. So I pulled a segment from a Vox article from a couple of years ago that I think really sets this up, and it's just a small excerpt. I did include the link to the fuller explanation by Vox, and you can go and watch that later, but this just sets it up so you understand why the most powerful man in the world is terrified of a blogger. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind, put that up there, and then join us back here on the other side of it. It's just about 3 or 4 minutes long. So.
On August 19th, 2020, Russian politician Alexei Navalny was shooting this campaign video. He was in Siberia, one of the many places where in about 3 weeks there would be local and regional elections. But he wasn't running for office. He was urging people to vote out the ruling party, United Russia, led by the president Vladimir Putin.
Мы с вами разберем, как можно победить эту ненасытную жабу, партию «Единая Россия». И до тех пор, пока мы от них не избавимся, шансов на нормальную жизнь у нас нет.
He's made many videos like this before, and they usually rack up millions of views. It's this ability to reach people via the internet that has helped make Navalny the face of Russia's opposition movement. Soon after making his case in Siberia, he got on a plane bound for Moscow. But the plane was suddenly diverted to Omsk. Navalny had been poisoned and collapsed on the plane. An investigation later revealed that he had been poisoned with Novichok, a highly toxic nerve agent that was developed by the Soviet Union in the 1970s. It was also used, likely by Russia in 2018, to attack Sergei Skripal, a former spy. Navalny survived the assassination attempt and set off a movement unlike any in recent history. How did he do it? And why is he such a threat to Putin? So in order to maximize his control, Putin surrounded himself with the most powerful elements in Russia, starting with the media. Police were sent into Russia's independent media companies, charging their owners and bringing newsrooms under state control.
After federal television, it went on to regional television, and then from there it went to print newspapers, and then it was like a flesh-eating machine. Whatever it could see that was still alive and functioning independently, it would gobble up.
This hid Putin's actions from the public, so he was able to go after another powerful element, Russia's elections. His regime manipulated who could run for office, and that typically meant Putin's party and a few fake candidates, sanctioned by the regime. This was designed to splinter the opposition vote. With the law on his side, within a decade, Putin insulated himself with the most powerful elements on all sides. And it was all held together by corruption.
Corruption is a structural feature of the regime. It's not an inefficiency of the regime. It's not a drag on the regime. It's the core of the regime.
According to a report, over $400 billion were lost to corruption in Russia between 2000 and 2008. But because Putin controlled the media, much of it was hidden, until a young lawyer named Alexy Navalny found a way to change that. In 2006, Navalny started a blog where he wrote about corruption. In 2010, he wrote that at least $4 billion was stolen out of the state-owned transportation company Transneft, and he had proof. He had bought stock in the company and was able to access internal documents that plainly showed how government money was funneled into offshore accounts owned by Transneft officials. And this was just the beginning. Navalny soon published investigations on corrupt oil schemes, land deals, and fraud at state-owned banks by Russian oligarchs and politicians. By posting straight to his blog, Navalny was circumventing state media to reveal corruption and expose Putin's regime in a way that Russians had never seen before, all while making a name for himself.
Like he thought that corruption was something knowable, that you could learn about it, you could systematize it, and again, you could take it seriously. And I said, you know what? I think we now have an actual politician in this country.
Welcome back. Interesting story of Vladimir Putin, or as we call him in Canada, Vladimir Putin.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. That was a good one. So, Putin. Yeah. Okay,
Sorry, that was kind of cheesy.
Okay, I see where you're going there. That's totally okay. So Holly commented, she corrected me on how I pronounce it, Navalny. So thank you, Holly. And she also said he's a racist, but in the context of the story, don't care. It's not really relevant because I'm not going to cancel this guy because the context of this story is he was just a flunky blogger, right? So maybe he's good, bad, and different. And, you know, we're seeing that Vox, the whole thing that came out with Vox being an advocate for child porn. I don't know what that was all about, but so let's set that aside. Just
because the Russian people have also been miserably bad on LGBTQ rights as well, right? And that's almost part of the country narrative in terms of, you know, their belief system and what they've done. So, but as you said, Carrie, it's not really relevant to this story, although it's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. But in the context of this story, this is the guy or his new push political party that is causing problems, and not because of who he is, but because they were calling out corruption. And I thought what was interesting is in that video, it showed where he had clear and convincing evidence based on his role as an investor in this company about where this money was going. They're so open about it, so completely open about it. And so what did Putin's regime do? Well, now they can just write a law because they have the power of the legislature to influence their elections. And so everyone has been freaking out, not everyone, because this really isn't getting a whole lot of coverage. But those people who are addressing are like, wait, how could Russia possibly do this? But when Andy brought this story to me, the first thing we both went was, wait, this looks familiar. And it has US origins. So this is part of the story that we want to talk about. In democracy, you've got to have free and open elections. So again, going back to Chuck Schumer and all of these things, oh boy, I just got a pop-up notification. Congressman Raja is now following me. You're going to have a bad time, Congressman. I'm going to tell you that right now, because you feature in this story too. So yeah. So anyway, thank you, Raja, for joining us. Feel free to weigh in. Yeah, so with this particular story, the corruption is rampant here in the US too. So it's not just the new laws that are coming out about IDs and all of these things in the South. This is something that's been going on for a very long time. And this goes to ballot access. So at the heart of the Russian story is ballot access. Can you even run? So in one part of the Vox video that they showed, I thought was very telling, where he said that the Putin's party was putting up shadow candidates, and that was to stop any other real candidate from getting a vote. They were splitting the vote. That happens here in the U.S. all the time. And in fact, when we look at progressive candidates, we always counsel them. I said, okay, myself and a whole bunch of others across the nation, we've got it all figured out. We've seen it too many times. If you are, for example, a Black woman who's running on a purely progressive platform, Medicare for all, livable wage, all of those things, and you're embracing it, full-throated, backbone, all of these sort of things, what's the DNC going to do? First thing they're going to do is put up a candidate who looks just like you, because here in the US, we are all about performative and demographics. So if you're a Black woman running on Medicare for all, I don't know, maybe somebody like a Nina Turner, then what they're going to do in Ohio in the DNC is they're going to put up another Black woman who looks just like you, maybe even sounds like you, but this is one of the anointed candidates, and she will have the backing of union bosses, not necessarily the union members. She will be taking PAC money, and she will be doing all of these things that we typically assign to a Republican candidate, but she's a Democrat. So Democrat in a blue jumpsuit up against the progressive, and that's how they do it. It's perfectly legal, and it happens every time. So while we're criticizing Russia, know that this happens, and it's happening right now in Nina Turner's race, if you didn't get that hint. All across the country, this is what they do. They'll put up one that looks like you, and then one that sounds like you, but maybe caters to the white demographic. So in Nina Turner's race, they have a white male who caters to more of that red surrounding district in the race that she's running in. So that's how that whole piece works. But getting back to ballot access, this is where it crosses over into U.S. issues. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind, the next graphic, please, sir. So in this one, I was reminded, and this is where Andy and I think we both went. Andy, I don't want to speak for you specifically, but remember a few years ago when you had Steny Hoyer, the majority whip, and Nancy Pelosi, who is the Speaker of the House and preemptive, Mama Bear, I guess is her nickname. They stood on stage during one of her weekly press conferences, national TV, and actually said it is perfectly okay for us to rig our own primaries. And nobody blinked, right? So there is this prevailing thought that the DNC owns the Democratic primary. They don't. And we've said this before. You have the corporate entity of the RNC and the DNC, and they get together and they manipulate the laws and regulations around the primaries. And then at a state level, that translates down to how things work. Here's the problem with that. You as a state taxpayer, all of the taxes that you pay at a state level, and this is your property taxes all the way up to sales and use, all of that goes to fund your local elections. Your elections happen at a county level. So you are paying for the ballot printing, you're paying for distribution, paying for your county clerks, you're paying for your clerk's staff, you're paying for those polling locations, you're paying for all of that, including the polling workers, the volunteers who get that little stipend, whether it's $50 or $150 a day. You pay for all of that. Absolutely all of that. So for two corporate entities to insist that they own the primaries that happen to fly under their brand, that's a lie. It is not at all accurate. And we need to push back on that a little bit. So here you had two representatives of a national party saying that they have every right to do this. Well, what does this look like if you're running as a Democratic candidate, particularly as a progressive candidate? So we saw in the 2018 race, those of us who were working for candidates who were active in our political system, I at the time was still a Democrat because I didn't get the message yet about how corrupt it is. And full disclosure, I did put this in the links this morning. My business, my small woman-owned business, it was myself and my business partner. We were sponsors of Chicago's Pride Parade. We were members of Chicago or Illinois LGBT Chamber of Commerce. We did things with green initiatives, and we also took our time and talents from a marketing perspective and donated to progressive candidates. It was all in-kind donations. And at the time, I was working as a campaign manager for a progressive congressional candidate. Well, because we were doing all of that inside of the Democratic Party, we didn't get a thank you. What we got was targeted by the DCCC's Blacklist Policy. And if you're not familiar with the Blacklist Policy, this was Sherry Bustos, also of Illinois, who came out and said, if you are going to work for a progressive candidate, if you are going to do anything as a consultant, as a business or whatever, we will put you on a blacklist policy and make sure we run you out of business. Sounds totally democratic, doesn't it? And that's exactly what happened.
Now, wasn't that if you were running against an incumbent?
Not necessarily. That is what they said. What they actually did was something else. So in my scenario, there was no incumbent. It was, we were challenging a Republican for the seat. So this was a Democratic primary, totally wide open for the Democrats. And whoever was going to win that primary was going to go up against the Republican who currently held the seat. So there was no reason to come after us and our business, but they did. They did. And I posted a link, and there was no less than 5 felonies that we had evidence for. We had video, we had recording, all of this. So why didn't it get prosecuted? Well, this is where I learned personally, rape is not illegal if no one will prosecute. That's the level we're at. And so in my county, we had a Republican state's attorney who refused to prosecute. And then I learned later why, because the Democrats and the Republicans in my county, interchangeable. Absolutely interchangeable. And even my Democratic chair at the time said, well, you know, we decide which districts are going to go red and which districts are going to go blue. And, you know, we've decided that those districts closer to Chicago that the Democrats will retain. And we just gave away these districts to the Republicans, and it's totally okay. And it blew my mind because I'm like, wait, that's not for you to decide. This is not your kingdom to divide up. Who did you ask before you made these kind of decisions? And the answer is they don't have to, right? So this is why when we look at another country, we need to look inward first. And this whole idea that these political parties own the primaries is an outright lie. Legally, it's not true. In practice, it's not true, but yet here they are. And until we challenge them as voters, they're going to keep doing it. So one of the most famous ones that came out during that same time period, there was a progressive candidate in Colorado who was running, and it was the same scenario where he was running in a Democratic primary, running as a Democrat, had been a lifelong Democrat, and they were trying to challenge a Republican who currently held that seat. So he thought, I'll ring and I will run. And because of his policy, his progressive policies, he was gaining traction. So members of the DNC didn't like that. So here's what happened. And this is something that came out from the Intercept. The Intercept published audio recordings that this particular candidate took of a private meeting between he and Steny Hoyer. And during this press conference, going back to Nancy Pelosi, her whole admonishment was, I don't know if it's legal to record somebody and they don't know. Yes, bitch, it is. Yes, yes. There are very few states where you cannot record unless two parties are aware of it. Most are a single party. So if you yourself are recording, and this is audio, not video, if you are recording, perfectly legal, but check the laws in your state. So she obviously doesn't know, was a little embarrassed at being caught with, their pants down, doing something totally immoral. And in my perspective, highly illegal, but yet who's going to prosecute? So Andy, this is the next audio. Yeah, Holly's like, I remember Colorado on the phone call. Here's a rewind for those who don't remember. And again, it's real brief. So bear with us. I think it's about 3 minutes long, and we'll meet you back on the other side.
In his farewell address, President Obama told Americans that if they were fed up, they should go out and run for office.
If you're disappointed by your elected officials, grab a clipboard, get some signatures, and run for office yourself.
And in the Trump era, thousands of Democrats have heeded his call, running for office in elections across the country. Meanwhile, in the race for Congress, the DCCC, or the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, has moved aggressively to crush competitive primaries. DCCC officials and senior Democrats are hand-picking moderate, business-friendly candidates and are attempting to push progressives out of key races. In Colorado's 6th District, one of the most competitive seats in the country, the DCCC moved in early to select Jason Crow, a corporate lawyer, as the party candidate, pushing resources, endorsements, and money to Crow while elbowing out progressive Democratic competitors. The Democratic Party often denies that they play favorites. What follows is a meeting between Congressman Steny Hoyer, the number 2 Democrat in the House, and Levi Tillerman, a progressive running for the nomination for the Colorado seat.
Levi, I want to talk to you about this congressional race.
Absolutely, that's what I expected.
Yeah.
You would like me to get out of the race.
And you keep saying, I would like you to get out. And of course, that's correct.
Yeah. I know you're fundraising for Crow.
Yeah. I'm for Crow. I am for Crow because a judgment was made very early on. I didn't participate in the decision.
So your position is a decision was made, very early on before voters had to say, that's fine because that's the DCCC knows better than the voters of the 6th Congressional District, and we should line up behind that candidate.
That's certainly the consequence of our decision. There are 2 things I'd like you to consider. One may be easier than the other. The first would be if you stay in the race. Mm-hmm. Frankly, I would hope you would not. I'll get to that. But if you stay in the race, it is not useful to the objective to tear down Crow. Mm-hmm. Crow's clearly the favorite. That doesn't mean he'll win. It just means he's the favorite.
I hear you.
That doesn't mean it's right. It just means
no, I hear you.
Right. I don't know Crow well, but I think he's a decent human being.
So before we go any further on that, Crow is the favorite. In no small part, Congressman Hoyer, because the DCCC not only put its finger on the scale, but started jumping on the scale very early on. And I'm born and raised a Democrat. I mean, it's undemocratic to have a small elite select someone and then try to rig the primary against the other people running. And that is basically what's been happening.
I hear you, and I disagree.
But you were part of that process
Absolutely.
As well. You said
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
I've been at this a long time.
Yeah.
When I said you need to get in strong, hard, and early, you disagree with me. Obviously, that's your choice.
You guys are shoveling money at him.
We're going to continue.
You're going to continue to do it?
We are going to continue to do it. And the reason, Levi, we're going to do it is because a decision was made to focus. It was clear that was our policy and our hope that we could early on try to come to agreement on a candidate that we thought could win the general, and to give that candidate all the help we could give them so that we would have a unified effort going into a general election.
Which means, effectively, Congressman Hoyer, I'm running a campaign against Crow and against you and against the DCCC because you guys are on Crow's side.
Yeah, you know, frankly, that happens in life all the time.
So we have a country where the leader of that country is basically picked by a small elite. They run basically with an iron fist, and they're propped up by rich people in the society who basically control everything, including the media, which defends them with their own narrative. Gary, what country am I talking about?
You're talking about the United States. Absolutely. And I have two personal stories. True stories absolutely happened, backed up completely by, so I wrote an article on one. One was my own personal experience. So the first one I want to talk about is Heidi Henry. And again, this is Illinois, because Illinois, next to Georgia, is probably one of the most corrupt political states in the union, believe it or not. So Heidi Henry was a great advocate. She started an indivisible group sort of down south Illinois, and she was a business owner. She has a disabled union member husband, children who are active in politics and in their community. She's like the poster child for the Democratic Party, and she was going to challenge a Republican. And the leaders of the Democratic Party in Illinois went to her and said, well, we don't want you to run in the Senate. How about this House race against Sue Rezin? Sue Rezin, longtime Republican, some crazy votes. Oh, real quick, Andrew, where you been? You joined us late. Are you talking about Peruvian elections? No, honey, we're talking about U.S. elections. So hold that out. But so Heidi decided, okay, well, if I did step out of the Senate race because the union wanted to put their own candidate in, what help am I going to get from the Democratic Party? So the gentleman at the time who was head of the Democratic Party in Illinois, John Cullerton, told her, we will give you $7 million and staff, and we will help you do this. She said, great. So she decided to run, and as soon as the primary ended, and she was the only Democrat, as soon as the primary ended, John Cullerton and his folks, not him specifically, he sent a lackey, said, hey, we want you to drop out. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm in the general now. I'm going against Sue Rezin. They're like, nah, we want you to drop out. Because the whole purpose of having her run was for the Democratic Party to allow the Republican Party to raise funds on the fear that there was a challenger. So Sue Rezin collected all of this money, and you could see through her campaign donations, she was giving it to Republicans in other counties who weren't getting the fundraising. So this was the Democrats and the Republicans working together in Illinois to funnel money from you to put it out the way they wanted. Well, when Heidi decided she wasn't going to drop out because she was in it for the right reasons, they threatened her, they threatened her family, they threatened her business. And I was personally on the phone as a journalist talking to the person at the Democratic Senate Victory Fund. Let me say that again. Democratic Senate Victory Fund, a gentleman there who was also getting paid by Koch brother money as well as Democrat money, who told me, if you don't back off this story, we are going to release a poll that totally tanks her campaign. And they did it anyway, right? So that was one story. The other story was this Democratic Congresswoman, Lauren Underwood. And this is how it really works. So Lauren Underwood was part of the Obama administration. She was a very low-level person working in health and HHS. And they were working under the Obama administration to do the regulations and reporting for ACA, Obamacare. And she had been tapped at that time to go through training. So remember, this is 2015, 2016, and they were grooming her for a run because she was a full-on advocate of ACA and had worked for an insurance company after she left the Obama administration. So they loved her, did not want Medicare for all because Illinois is completely overrun by Blue Cross Blue Shield, completely. And I'm naming names here because it's all verifiable as fact. So Raja, I see you with the Blue Cross thing. Okay, so anyway, what happened was when I was working for a challenger, a true progressive, I called the DCCC because that's what you do, a simple handshake. Hey, what do you need from us? Can we get any support from you? How is this going to work? Hey, this is who we are. And I remember calling him, and the very nice lady was so sweet. So she's like, what was the name of your candidate again? I said, okay. And she said, hold on. And you could hear like paper flipping, like she was going through a notebook or something. And then it got real quiet. And then she came back and it was a totally different person. She was so rude and dismissive. And she's like, yeah, no, we've got nothing for you. And then the other side of it is, if you are in a big city, big metropolitan area, there are very few lawyers who are adept at these election laws and ballot access and things like this and able to keep you on a ballot. There's just a very small handful who have that unique skill set. So in your campaign, you should be calling these people and say, hey, we'd like to put you on retainer because we know that we're going to get challenged by the incumbents, by the DCCC, the DNC, even of our own party. You're fighting them. And if you're a green, independent, libertarian, okay, you better have that retainer already. So when we called one of the attorneys who was a specialist in Chicago, he openly said to me, and I'm not going to name his name, but he openly said to me, he said, look, if I get a call from Madigan, who at the time was head of the Democratic Party, as well as head of the legislature in Illinois, he said, if I get a call from Madigan telling me not to take this up because they want to pave the way for the anointed candidate, I'm just not going to call you back. I just want you to know that up front. So it's already in place. All of this stuff is in place. And here is an attorney who knows better, but he's thinking of, well, if I go against these people, I'm never going to get a referral again. I'm going to lose my practice. So what do? Right? All of this is some cray shit. So this is the last graphic, Andy, and I know we've inundated people with videos and graphics and everything else, but hold on. I do have a solution for you, and it's been staring us in the face for a very long time. And I think we have short memories and we forget this. So there's this really great resource that I posted the link to about ballot access and all of these cases that have gone on for years, absolute years. So for those of you who are checking out of the process and say, I'm out of electoral policy, you are doing exactly what they want you to do. Exactly. They want you to give up. They want you to check out so that they can just act with impunity and no one will challenge them. Yet here we have these cases. And if you're a baby lawyer and you're looking into some of these things and you want to help out and you actually want to fix some things, here's some case files for you. Absolutely. But the big thing is, do you remember when Obama ran against Hillary? The first time in that primary, Obama was not the anointed candidate. Obama was not the funded candidate. Hillary Clinton was. She had this massive apparatus. She had the momentum. She had connections. She had a ton of cash, all of this sort of thing. Why was she not the nominee the first go around? Andy, any guesses?
No, not a one.
Okay, so I went back and looked at the numbers. Obama won that primary by less than 150,000 votes. 150,000. And that is the key. And Andy, you've said it before, I've said it before. It is sheer volume. And that is what the Russian law is also looking at. All of those people who are suddenly becoming aware of the corruption and that you can push back, that had Putin terrified. That had his party terrified. All of the stuff that's going on now with leftist media, with the corporations trying to dampen and doing everything with the algorithms, that is fear. Because once you realize your power and what you actually can achieve, the game is up. It's all up. So if you have a progressive candidate, and it doesn't matter really what party you run under, whether it's Democrat, Green, whatever, sheer volume of votes. They can't stop all of us, right? It's like that Area 51 push. They can't stop all of us. And that is so true. And if you doubt what I'm saying, go back and look at the vote totals between Obama and Hillary Clinton in that first primary. Obama was never supposed to be the one that won, ever. He was supposed to be the one that helped raise funds, but he was never supposed to be the one that actually clinched that primary and went on to win. It was supposed to be Hillary. And because all of us got out there and we started voting and we got excited about it, that's what took it over the hump there. And that's why we had Obama as president and not Hillary. So the same thing can happen. So here's where you got to get around your election laws. And each state has their own, because the states run their own. And sometimes each county has their own too. So when it comes to, do you want to vote in the Democratic primary? What did New York do? New York put that deadline so far forward because they wanted to screw progressives because they're terrified of you. And that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. So I always cringe when I see particularly leftist podcasters, they say check out. Don't get involved in any politics. Like, no, that is not the answer, because I guarantee you. And what was it? One of the Yang guys that I follow, he posted this morning. They were in New York. There was a survey about, do you agree or disagree with defunding the police? And there was this little caveat that he ignored on this chart. The chart said likely voters. And he missed that. I'm like, he's like, oh, 76% don't favor defunding the police. I'm like, nah. The caveat there, the filter was of likely voters. So for those of you who don't vote, nobody gives a shit what your opinion is. And I want you to understand that. If you're not going to vote, if you're not going to participate in the census, nobody gives a shit what you think. And that's the way it is. So if you want to count for more than just a tweet, a pithy little comment, you have to participate. And when we start organizing, whether you like Alexy or not, he had the right model. When we start organizing, yeah, that's how you get in there. That's how you do it. And you can do it at a small local level. And this is how we see such upsets in some of these elections. And I'm not necessarily talking about federal, I'm talking about state as well, state and local. I have seen some tremendous upsets that, of course, corporate news is never going to cover, so you may not be aware of it. And that is all, what is Holly said, max 740, you got it. I don't know what that means. I'm not cool and hip, Holly. What is MAC 740? So, she's responding to Mac, who said, but Obama governed like Hillary. So that's why the road for progressives through the Democratic Party leads to a great bullshit. I'm calling you on that bullshit. We did not know Obama's politics and policies, but he was an outsider. So what I'm talking about is the election. So you can be pissed off now, right? Like Andy and I have disagreements about AOC. I loved AOC as a candidate. AOC as a congresswoman, I'm not crazy about it. I'm not crazy about it at all. But what I'm talking about is the election. So this means if you're going to back a candidate that you think is a true progressive, let's be sure. Let's be sure before we put another one in there. And again, this is not just federal, this is state, because, oh, by the way, I've made this case before. Quit waiting for Congress. We all look at federal elections because it's super sexy and it's always on TV. But in my state, in New Mexico, every single progressive policy that you say you want was just enacted here in my state, with the exception of Medicare for all, because it's not fiscally possible at a state level. But if we can end qualified immunity, if we can ensure reproductive rights, if we can ensure end of life, minimum wage, all of those things at a state level, shouldn't you be doing that at your state too? Shouldn't you? And while you're all super focused on Congress and begging Congress, still begging Congress to do something, they're not. But here in my state, we are. So let's see, Mac says, third party, darling, that's what is needed. By the way, I live in Illinois. Well, Mac, I moved from Illinois and my heart goes out to you. There's a lot going on there. But yeah, third party, it's not just third party. So here in New Mexico, we have the Green Party, we have Libertarian, you have the Socialist Party, you have the Working Party, you have the Democratic Party, you have the Republican Party, and I think there's one more. And what that does is, first off, nobody vote shames here, and if they do, they get serious pushback. So in Illinois, if you vote Green, people will come down on you, and you got to be willing to say, no, this is my vote, my choice. How dare you, right? So in New Mexico, because we have so many parties, minor parties, unofficial parties, all of these things, it's a policy discussion, and people are engaged in voting. What are you doing in Illinois, right? In Illinois, you've got red and blue, and they're interchangeable, like I said. So now what do you do? So when you have more parties and more, Green, Libertarian, whatever your political leaning is, then you get to shape that vote. But it doesn't matter if you don't vote, if you don't get involved. And you're not going to win every time. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. There have been many times we've had great candidates and we've been thwarted by either corruption or just voters didn't get out. Voters don't give a shit. You got to keep trying. You got to keep trying. So,
well, that's the thing, right? Like the difference is we see these progressives, these that get elected, they're in Congress, and oh my God,
I think Andy's phone rang. It was either a baseball theme or hockey.
No, it was just my phone going up. Sorry about that. Anyways, the difference is between hoping and praying that the candidate that you elected is going to take the initiative and make changes, versus demanding it, right?
Yes.
Like once they get there, okay, you're now my representative. You've told me that you're progressive, that you believe in this and this and this and this. Okay, it's time for us collectively to now force you to do that, right? Yep. Demand the change. That's where the electoral politics part meets the grassroots movement part, right? Okay, there's the voicemail for not answering my phone.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time looking for really cool ringtones. Anyways, so that's the difference, right? You've got people that are in Congress that are supposedly progressive, but now that they're there, the Jimmy Dore, the force the vote, that's what's needed, right? If you don't believe that your elected officials are doing what you want them to do, then it's up to you to demand that they do it.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And I would question anybody who tries to stifle you, whether it's centrist, mainstream media, leftist media, or even an ally. I can't imagine. Well, no, it's happened to me when somebody says, like in the last election, I voted Green. And people are like, but I'm like, first, I know how elections work. I know how the numbers work. Fuck off. Seriously, it's not your choice. And I was raised, and I'm a little bit older, and I came from a very strict Catholic conservative family. So of course they were all Republican. And my grandfather just drilled it into us. No one has a right to ask you who you voted for or how you vote. And if they do, they're absolutely wrong. And you guard that with your life. And that was one of the things I took with me, obviously not his political leanings, but that has stayed with me, stayed very strong. No one has a right to ask you. And if they do, that is part of that voter intimidation and harassment, and that needs to stop, absolutely. So Mac reminds you, Andy, that there was violence according to AOC, and you know what? Bullshit on that too, right? Here's the irony. Because she cried wolf with the violence of forcing the vote, then we got to experience real violence on January 6th. This is how it happens. I've been screaming at this for years. I'm not trying to minimize what happened, but I have been saying this to my DNC counterparts and leadership. If you don't take off some of the pressure and at least toss working people a bone, it is going to explode. And they ignored it because they're so happy to cash those checks. They don't care who wins or who loses because they still get checks. Think of this guy I just mentioned at the Democratic Senate Victory Fund in Illinois. He's getting paid by both sides. He doesn't give a shit. So that was the problem. The pressure just kept building and building and building. And then you have these people with cognitive dissonance and panic following QAnon and listening to a president. And oh, by the way, they're still out there, still doing this stuff because Democrats will not let off the pressure. And that's exactly how it happens. So, and Mac agrees, it is going to explode. So this is why we do what we do.
And that's
Andy.
the problem. That's the problem with capitalism, right? That's the problem. That's why it eats itself eventually, because they can't stop. They just have to continue to devalue human life and make more and more money until every market's been tapped and the people have nothing, and they, in order to survive, have to do something, right? It doesn't matter what the media tells them anymore, that if they want to feed their family, something has to happen. And enough of people, it reaches critical mass and enough people do that, right? So that's what happens. Just briefly, Carrie, before we go, one of our audience brought up the Peruvian election, which is happening right now. And just very quickly, a race between a workers' union progressive style candidate named Pedro Castillo, who has challenged Keiko Fujimori, who is the daughter of disgraced Alberto Fujimori, who was the president for some time and was booted out of office for being a bad boy. And the narrative in the media is very centrist, apologist, right? That Keiko should be the one to win because she is the lesser of two evils.
So it's like an Ivanka Trump running. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Andy.
Isn't it wonderful? What country does that sound like? So if you thought that this was an American issue or a Russian issue, no, this is Peru. Right?
Oh,
it's same old. And we're now seeing, because the election just happened and they're still counting the ballots, that there's been reports and people producing home videos of going into vote and getting handed ballots that were already pre-selected for Keiko.
Nah, see, and this is your power. This is your power, right? So Black Lives Matter and our cell phone videos. Even my son, when he was in high school, they all knew. As soon as you get pulled over, something happens, everybody turn on your video camera. This is you. This is your power. There's so many more of us than there are of them. And we need to treat them like the addicts they are, right? So if you had a relative who was a crack addict or a meth addict, you treat them with compassion, but you know their head's not in the right space. So if they told you, well, I'm going to run your election, and you'd be like, the fuck you are, you're an addict. You need to sit down. And this is the same mindset we need to come at our electoral politics and policy with. It's like, that's great, President Biden. We love you, and we want you to know that you are accepted, but you need to sit down over here and you need to cancel student debt right now. And we're not asking. And that's the mindset we need to be at. So Mac is like, Yeah, he agrees with, I'm not sure he or she, so I'm sorry about the pronoun, but we have commodified everything, and Kiko, daughter of a dictator. So Matt, thank you for bringing that subject up. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thank you for weighing in. And I love the commentary that we get from our audience, and sometimes the pushback and the critique. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sitting through some of these videos. I know they were a little long, but I think it was kind of necessary for context so that we can get to the heart of, as you said, Andy, it's not just Russia. It's Peru and all of these other places. And oh, by the way, here in the US, where we have officially been labeled a failed democracy.
Yes, absolutely. And that just shows you the strength of the US globally, right? That when things happen in the US, it's a domino effect, right? That people that are pundits in this space will consistently say that the US is number one export in the world is neoliberalism. Right. We see that happening in different places. We saw the effects in Brazil and the effects in India. Right. And how the capitalist narrative to fight a pandemic failed so horribly and substantially that these are the places that have the most cases and the most deaths. Right. And now we're seeing that in places like Peru, where, the neoliberalism was imported from the US just like everywhere else. That's why, as a Canadian, I do most of my online activism in the US, because I know that if you can affect change here, it will have an effect on the rest of the world, right? If there's a chance for us to survive this climate disaster on the horizon, it has to happen here first. And any of the other problems in the more just society that we're looking for here will have an effect everywhere, right? If our survival depends on it. That's why I do it.
Mm-hmm. And because you're awesome. Let's just be honest. You're much nicer.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I can't disagree with that.
That's so true. So yeah, that is it for today. So again, if somebody has a topic that you want us to do a deep dive on, I'm happy to do it. I will do the homework. I will pull the sources. I always go to source documents, data, all of that sort of thing. So I'm more than happy to do that for whatever topic you come up with. Just let us know. For those who did tune in this morning, Misanthropic, you are so late, but we appreciate you joining. So Mac, Holly, Miss, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back here on Wednesday. And just real quick, a teaser for a Friday show. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's super funky, and you need to tune in because we are going to have an epic guest. And even for you younger folks, you're going to know who this is. I'm so excited. So yeah, that's coming up Friday, but Wednesday we will be back with another great show. Not as good as Friday, but good.
Well, there's a testimonial for you. Well, thank you, Carrie. And thanks everybody for watching. It was a fun show. Hopefully you get some information you find useful. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Take care. We'll see you here bright and early on Wednesday morning. See ya.
We bout that, ayy. We in the song. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Carry the dog.